election coverage you can trust. From your election connection, News Radio 95, WXTK.
And good evening and welcome to our live debate here on News Radio 95, WXTK, and also being simulcast live on television here on Cape Cod Community Media Channel 99. Good evening, I'm your host, Matt Pitta. Thanks for being with us tonight. We're right in the thick of election season, just a few days to go before we get to the election in November. Tonight we present to you the campaign, the election, the debate for the 5th Barnstable State Representative seat, and our two candidates for that seat. We'd like to thank them for joining us here tonight, and everybody here in the audience on News Radio 95, WXTK, and also those of you who are joining us on television, on cable channel 99 at Cape Cod Community Media Center, and also you can also watch us streaming live at capemedia.org. If you're in the car right now listening on the radio, you can also watch us streaming live at capemedia.org. Welcome in. I'd like to welcome in our two candidates tonight, the incumbent for the 5th Barnstable State Representative seat, Republican Representative Randy Hunt. Randy, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Matt. Thank you.
And our Democratic challenger, joining us as well for the 5th Barnstable seat, Patrick Ellis. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us here tonight as well.
Good evening, Matt. Thank
Excellent. Well, folks, here's what we've done here tonight. We have done a little bit of a coin toss before we began our live debate here for you tonight to decide who is going to give our opening statement first. And what we'll be doing is giving 2-minute opening statements, and then we're moving to the questioning round, which I'll be doing over the course of the next 50 minutes or so. So settle in. We're going to hear about all the issues that are surrounding the 5th Barnstable State Representative seat right now. And the coin flip was determined that Randy Hunt would give his opening statement. Representative Hunt, you have 2 minutes, please, for your opening statement, if you would.
Thank you, Matt. And I want to thank WXTK as well as Cape Cod Community Media Center for putting this on. This is a great opportunity for people to hear from both of us and to have a lot of input into understanding what this state race is about. We've certainly been somewhat usurped by coverage of the Massachusetts Senate race and of course the presidential campaign, so it's great to have the opportunity to be here tonight. When I ran in 2010, I sent out literature and I made some promises about what I was going to do on Beacon Hill. 3 major things that I said was I was going to fight against tax increases. The second thing was to work for small businesses and to try and do something to get some of the onerous penalties that are on small businesses taken away regarding health insurance. And also, thirdly, to do something about the scourge of opiate and prescription drug abuse that we see on Cape Cod. So I've worked on those things, and I hope that we have an opportunity to talk about those issues tonight, and I'll certainly try and work those in. And I also am going to talk tonight about some of the things that we need to do. Certainly on the illegal and legal drugs, but being passed out on the street, opiate drugs, we need to do a lot more. Definitely. There are things that we can do, and I have some plans for that for my next term. The other thing is we waste too much money at the state level, and we need to be doing a lot of work on getting the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our system. And I hope that we have some time to talk about that as well. Happy to be here, and I look forward to your questions, Matt.
All right, Randy, thank you, Representative Hunt. And now our opening statement from the challenger, Patrick Ellis. Patrick, please, 2 minutes.
Good evening, Matt, and thanks very much for the opportunity, and to XTK and to Channel 99. I'm a proud Cape Codder who's served my town of Sandwich for over 20 years in a public position, and I sandwiched that with 2 business careers on either side. I started a business right out of college in Sandwich, and was recruited into the Public Works Department by a selectman who had admired my work style. I worked very closely with the selectman at the time and was very thankful to have a very good career in Sandwich, where I proved to the people there that I was a hard worker, a decisive leader, that I was dependable, hardworking, and was a consensus builder and problem solver. Then my 3 priorities that I bring to this race are a change in the focus of what I think is important for the 5th Barnstable District. I feel like we can do better focusing on issues like transportation, education funding, and protection of our environment. We have critical challenges in the 5th Barnstable District. And so that folks know what it is, the 5th Barnstable District is composed of all of Sandwich, 2 precincts in Barnstable, Marston's Mills and West Barnstable, 3 precincts in Bourne, precincts 1, 2, which run along both sides of the canal, and precinct 7, which is Monument Beach. In addition to that, a new precinct was also added, precinct 9 in Plymouth. It's a very diverse and spread out district, but the commonality is that it's about transportation. 2 bridges, big highways, and that access to highways and access to services and transportation impact every other aspect of our economy. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your opening statements, and we'll now move to our round of questioning. And we're going to start out with the first question to Representative Hunt, and there will also be a response from Mr. Ellis as well. So the question to start us out, gentlemen, is, and then for Mr. Hunt, if you are returned to office, and then for Mr. Ellis, if you are elected to office for your first term, in January after your inauguration, what will be your first bill or piece of legislation that you're going to seek or file as soon as you get into office in January?
Well, Matt, it's a great question. I alluded already in my opening comments about the issues that we have with illegal and prescription drug abuse. We did pass an omnibus bill in the past session, which was about a dozen different freestanding bills that we got into a bill that passed at the 11th hour in July, which is going to help out a lot with stopping doctor shopping and doing a few other things that will help make steps forward on dealing with prescription drug abuse. One of the things that I think that we need to make big steps forward on is a continuation of a program that I introduced to the Barnstable County Sheriff, and that was one that I heard about in one of my committee hearings on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee. And the program itself has now been put into play as a pilot program over at the county lockup. And that is actually getting inmates who are coming out of jail into a program that uses an opiate blocker drug, as well as taking them straight over to Gosnold on Cape Cod for counseling. So far, this program, which is only being done in Barnstable County, is seeing great results. Less recidivism, people actually getting their lives back together. We need to do more in that we need to spread that program across the Commonwealth. Another program that I've worked with on my membership on the Interagency Council on Substance Abuse and Prevention is called Mission Vet. That program is another one that has been started in Worcester County and Essex County and also out in Western Mass that needs to be brought across the Commonwealth. So one of the first things that we need to do is to deal with the prescription drug abuse problems that we see here on Cape Cod and across the Commonwealth.
All right, Mr. Ellis, what would be the first piece of legislation that you would seek to file if you are elected to Beacon Hill?
My first piece of legislation that I'd want to file would be to convince the leadership to revisit ed reform. There is no more expensive issue for the towns in this district than education. The last time that bill was revisited was 1993. That predates school choice, it predates charter schools, and we have been disenfranchised here on Cape Cod, particularly with education funding. It's the elephant in the room, if you will, that needs to be addressed. And for all of our towns, if we could make even small, incremental changes in that. For example, Sandwich's assessment is nearly 70% for education. If we were to make even a 5% gain there, it would be millions of dollars that could go to other things in our town. So I would focus my efforts on education as my primary goal.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts on this, for either of you? Anything at this point?
Well, there are a lot of things that we need to do. I filed a bill in the past session that is a bill that it's called the Personal Income Tax Reduction or Simplification Bill. It has an unfortunate acronym of PITS, but I have to think of it as NASCAR instead of a bowl of cherries type of thing. And what it does is it would essentially take the federal income tax or the federal taxable income, multiply it times a percentage, and then you have your state income tax. So it could be done with a simple calculation, and it's not without precedent. It has some other states doing this. Why do this? I talked to the DOR, and they were very excited about it because it would take all of the people who are doing auditing on personal income tax returns and allow them to be freed up to go after the bigger fish, which are the corporations. And they said it would also free up 2 people who do nothing but coordinate changes in the Internal Revenue Code with what we have in the Massachusetts Revenue Code. So they like it a lot. We got it started, and I want to see that through.
Mr. Ellis, anything on that?
No, but I would add that another issue that I bring up constantly and was really the first person to write about is the issue of a new bridge. And I really think that that's something that needs to be initiated. It'll be a long process to galvanize the support we need for this. So I wouldn't waste any time in getting together something to get a bridge going. We haven't built a bridge over the Cape Cod Canal since Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president in 1935. So it's high time we address that. I think it's an excellent time for us to go after federal support. We are disenfranchised again with the federal government because we are a donor state. We do not get back the money we give to the federal government. Many other states have significant highways that they are able to maintain because they're getting federal highway support that we're not. So I'd be anxious to fight for that.
I promise you we'll get back to transportation, so I want to revisit that in a little bit.
Okay.
I'd like to move on to our next round of questions, and we'll stay with Mr. Ellis. I want to talk about healthcare cost containment. We have what most would feel is near universal healthcare coverage now in Massachusetts, but with that has still come some big struggles from business owners that we talk to who say that they're making decisions based on hiring and moving forward based on what their healthcare costs are going to be, and that many of them are still being penalized. So if you were to go to Beacon Hill, Mr. Ellis, what are your thoughts about working on healthcare cost containment within this framework of the healthcare system we have now in Massachusetts?
Well, we've made great gains, and I'm quite proud of what the state has done. And we're a good example to the other states of having moved forward. And you see that on the national level. But what we haven't done is wrestled with the big issue of health care, and that is we spend far too much on administration of health care. And that has, again, the most significant area that could reduce our costs. When you compare the way we deliver healthcare services to nearly every other civilized country in the world, we have 40% higher administrative costs. And we absolutely have to deal with that. And I would be focused on that to try to deliver the services and put that money in the hands of nurses, doctors, and people who do patient care.
Mr. Hunt, Representative Hunt.
Well, we have a first-in-the-nation law that we passed this past summer, which is called the Payment Reform Act. And in that, we dealt with a number of different problems that we see, particularly in that there is incentive in the current healthcare system to do tests, to do more tests, to do more labs, to have more doctor visits. And that system actually profits because of the volume of care that's provided, not the quality of care. So in this bill that we passed, and which I'm proud to say that I had a very important amendment for small businesses in that bill to redefine the small business as it pertains to what's called a fair share contribution penalty, that I was able to get that in along with a bill that we combined with my amendment from Linda Forey, who is a Boston representative. And it is going to save small businesses literally thousands of dollars in penalties a year. In fact, I was talking to the owner of a home-owned liquor store just 2 nights ago who said that he has some friends who are in the business that could save as much as up to $40,000 a year because of the changes that were in my amendment.
Mr. Ellis, any response you'd like to add?
Yeah, just one addition to that is that the other thing we need to do is get closer to single payer. And we have far too many hands in the pie right now. And the other thing about healthcare and the containment of costs is that we need to decouple healthcare from employment. And that would actually level the playing field for businesses who compete with each other. if you were all working off the same platform, and I experienced this as a business owner because I had to compete with businesses that didn't provide health care to its employees. My company chose to do that, and we were a very progressive company in that sense in taking care of our employees. But we had to compete with companies that either didn't provide health care or provided a far different level of health care than we could provide. So I think that's a way in which we move forward and a way in which we balance the scales for everyone.
Representative Hunt, are you on record with single pay? You're not on record, but you have an opinion on what Mr. Ellis said about single pay?
If I actually am on record, but I'll repeat that I'm not in favor of single payer system, and I have to remind people that the payment reform idea was brought to us by a number of very smart individuals in the Senate President's office, as well as the House Speaker's office, and a very smart individual, Steve Walsh, who was the chairman of the Healthcare Financing Committee. And one of the things that they were not intent on at all was moving towards single-payer health care at this point. I don't think it's a good idea for us. I think that what we have is going to be a model for the rest of the nation, and it is going to save us upwards of $200 million over the next 10 years because of the changes that we put into law this past year.
All right, thank you, Representative. We'll move to our next round of questioning, and we'll stay with Representative Hunt. We learned just over a week ago that those of you who are going to be returning to Beacon Hill are going to have to vote again on a new casino compact for members of our Mashpee Wampanoag tribe here on Cape Cod. We've learned basically what the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs does not want or will not allow in terms of what the state contribution would be. So for each of you now, if you're returned to office, Mr. Hunt, and then for Mr. Ellis, what will you be looking for as you folks have to recraft legislation for the Wampanoag Compact?
Well, let me tell you this first, Matt. The compact that we have now was the result of us passing Class 3 gaming in the state of Massachusetts. I voted against that, by the way. I was not for having Class 3 gaming in Massachusetts, but it did pass, and because of that, now, having 2 precincts in Mashpee as part of my district, I certainly wanted to do everything that I could to help the Wampanoags get a leg up in southeastern Massachusetts. So I did vote for the compact. Unfortunately, Ken Salazar, who's at the top of the heap over there, came back with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and said, well, this is not going to pass muster. Now, they didn't tell us what would pass muster, which is, it turns it into kind of a poker game. That's a bad analogy, I suppose, in this case. But we don't know what, I'll follow the metaphor through, saying we don't know what they're holding in their hand. Mm-hmm. And so they're looking for us to modify that. I think that we need to do that as quickly as we possibly can and do something that we think is going to pass. If we do this 1 or 2 more rounds, I think that we certainly should come up with something that's going to be beneficial for the tribe and for southeastern Massachusetts. All
right, thank you, Representative. Mr. Ellis, if you go to Beacon Hill in January, what will you be looking for or advocating for when it comes to this new casino compact that they have to revisit?
Well, like Representative Hunt, I was not in favor of the gaming, but I would also take the will of the people and work to try to get the best deal we could get for both sides. And I think that's the best I could say about that, given the lack of details that are out there right now on this. But it's not my it's not my cup of tea to be behind gaming. But if it's the will of the people, I'm willing to work towards something that'll work for the tribe and work for the communities involved.
All right. Thank you on that question. We'll move to a next round of questions here. We'll stay with you, Mr. Ellis. One issue that's come up as this campaign has gone along, and one thing that the Lieutenant Governor has been working on, is the possibility that we could see another BRAC, another race realignment, and that does have a big impact on portions of the district, which one of you will go to Beacon Hill and represent. And there's discussion, I know, ongoing now as to, one, trying to keep the resources that we have there on the base, and then long-term, what should the long-term use of those 22,000 or so acres out on the base be? Now, while obviously it's a federal issue, state lawmakers do try to wield influence. So what are your thoughts right now in terms of what your vision would be for that large piece of property out there on the Upper Cape at the Mass Military Reservation?
Well, most of it, Matt, was Sham Kroll State Forest at one time. And I would do everything I could to ensure that the base stays as vital as it is now, and in fact would like to see it expanded for several other things. One, I think it's a really good location for wind. You can put facilities there without having neighbor issues. We have to be aware that the NIMBY was the acronym for the 80s and the 90s, and banana is the acronym for today. And banana is build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. So with that in mind, the base is the perfect area for us to use for alternative energies, both solar and wind. In addition to that, people are not as aware now of the impact that using our National Guard as our active military has had on facilities like the base. And I would like to see that reinvigorated as a training site. I think as we return our troops as we have from Iraq and Afghanistan, we will bring them back home. And we need places to train troops so that we have a ready National Guard for emergencies like our hurricane that's breathing up the coast on us now. And I have experience as a public works director using the National Guard for snow removal, using the National Guard for cleaning up after Hurricane Bob. And right now in the state, we are at our lowest level of preparedness for this because our Guard is on active duty. So I would love to see that base revitalized as the healthy training facility that it was. And I think that stands to really help our Cape economy. And I also think that the base could be used for transportation center.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Representative Hunt, on the issue of the base, a vision that you might have for it, please.
Well, I was out at the base a couple of months ago when the National Guard and other active duty services were doing exactly what my opponent was talking about, which was training for an incident, a major incident. In this particular case, the model was that there was a nuclear dirty bomb that was released over by Fenway Park, and then a simultaneous attack over by the ocean front in Boston. And so they used this base as a model for learning how to deal with those issues. Everywhere from coordination of communications to learning how to dig through piles of rubble in order to rescue people safely. So it is being used for that now. I was also at a meeting this week with a number of people over there, including Colonel Tony Schiavi, who has a new role, and that is to find two roles. One is to find new ways that we can use the base, and he's doing a pretty good job already of talking to some businesses that make drone airplanes, and it's a perfect place to fly those and test those. But it would not be the perfect place to do that if we had dozens or hundreds of windmills out there. So I don't think that that is something that we ought to be looking forward to, is having windmills out there, because it would actually take a lot of the utility out of that base for doing the training. His other role is to make sure that the different users of the base that we actually put together, he is putting together a single DPW, Department of Public Works out there, that is going to be more efficient. And when BRAC comes up, and they're thinking it's more likely to be around 2017 than in 2014, which is good. By that time, if they do a good job of pulling these businesses in and making better use and more efficient use of the base, I think that we'll stand a very good chance of keeping that open.
Mr. Ellis, would you like to respond a little bit to that in terms of the representative doesn't necessarily agree with putting more wind out on the base?
It's a big area. And I don't think that you would be compromising one effort by using something like alternative energies in addition to it. And also, the part of what I'm talking about is training a peacetime military. And I think that's something that is lacking there are many public works directors who've come out of the CBs and have come out of National Guard who learned what they know in the military. not from war, but from building facilities to support the efforts in war. So that's my interest there, is to develop a strong peacetime military, National Guard that can actually deal with local issues and things like hurricanes, snowstorms, ice storms. We really need that mobile-ready force. We need our National Guard back.
All right. Anything further, gentlemen?
My simple point was that is what we're doing out there now. And obviously, as the war winds down in Afghanistan, we'll be in a position to use it for peacetime training. I hope that that will be the case.
We'll move on to our next round of questioning. Representative Hunt, we'll stay with you. I'd like to discuss with the both of you your thoughts on tax policy on different levels, your thoughts on either raising meals taxes, lodging taxes, property taxes, further income tax rollback increase. When the governor came in office in his first term, he talked quite a bit about property tax relief. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. So let's talk generally about your belief structure about tax policy here in Massachusetts. Representative Hunt.
Glad to. The governor hasn't given us any property tax relief because the programs that have been put in place don't allow that to happen. We spend too much money to allow money to be going back to the towns and cities that would make that happen. I was certainly, you can look at my record on taxes. I voted to take the 6.25% sales tax back to 5%. I also voted to take the income tax, which is at 5.25%, back to 5%, which is something that we voted on by citizens petition in 2000 and never got there. And the way that you pay for these things is go back to what I was saying earlier, and that is we need to get at the fraud, waste, and abuse that's in the system. I can cite one simple example just to show you that we are wasting $60 million, not my number, the Inspector General's number, with the MBTA and a program that they have in place to give rides to people who have handicaps. It's a great program, and it's $2 rides. The problem is they haven't actually asked people to verify the reasons why they're eligible for the program, so they just accept people in it. And the Inspector General said when they're on it, they're never checked to see if they should stay on it. So the Inspector General said in March of 2012, this year, that the MBTA was wasting $60 million a year, and in May and June we were looking at bailing the T out to the tune of $50 million, a one-time shot in the arm. I voted against that because if they would just follow what the Inspector General told them to do, they could save more than the $50 million shot in the arm they were looking for every year, year in, year out.
All right. Thank you, Representative Hunt. Mr. Ellis, tax policy.
Well, there are certain things that we need to address in tax policy that relate, as I mentioned earlier, education, funding is an important aspect of that. That's the kind of local tax relief we're going to get if we can get the state to pony up more of its share of public education. I agree that there are obviously in any government entity, you're going to find waste, fraud, and abuse. You're going to find it, and I would back any attempt to find that. But I also think that it stains government in the sense of a lot of people doing really good things. And we need to understand that we need to build government as much as we need to break it down. Now, one other aspect that our Cape Towns suffer from is our in lieu of tax payments from the state. And we used to get a significant sum of money from the state for properties we own that are state-owned in our towns. That's an area where we could need some help. And it's something that we've had promises in the past on, but that's an area where if you ask any of the town managers, particularly on the Upper Cape, that is a significant hit on them. So those are the two areas that I would want to focus on Beacon Hill.
We should move on, or a little bit more on tax policy?
I would add to that this. I agree that towns and cities continue to get hammered, and I've I've said for a long time, certainly as a selectman for 6 years, I said that I thought it was too easy for the state to just punt the ball over the fence. In other words, balance the state budget on the back of towns and cities. And in the last 2 budgets, we, the Republican minority party of only 33 out of 160 in the House, we proposed an amendment that was passed on 2 successive budgets to bring back $65 million more in local aid to towns and cities by taking up a piece of the budget surplus from each of those 2 years and putting it into this program. So it's something that actually provides relief, it saves jobs, and in some cases towns will be able to keep their workforce or even hire a few more because of the relief that we get out of that amendment that we put forward.
Any further on tax policy? We can move on. All right. Gentlemen, I did promise we'd go back to transportation, and I'd like to go through some of these issues, and we will go with Mr. Ellis here first out of the box on this. You did refer to the bridge, but I'll just set up the question here for you. This district, your district, has been kind of at ground zero for a lot of the Cape's major transportation problems over the last couple of years. The bridges, then kind of a perfect storm of the Exit 2 project last year, the 149 project being completed, and a lot of folks on the Cape felt as though that State Highway or MassDOT was not being responsive, lack of communication between MassDOT and the Army Corps when it came to the bridge. So multiple parts here to this question, but first of all, in terms of what we should do about the bridges, the canal bridges, we understand that it's the Army Corps that obviously oversees those, but is there a bigger, larger role for the state? Can the state work to maybe either take them over? The Chamber of Commerce in Wendy Northcross has suggested that that might be a possibility. So let's explore that issue about what we should be doing about our canal transportation. Mr. Ellis.
Well, thank you, Matt. That is the big problem on Upper Cape. And it is something where we've, excuse the expression, we've put our head in the sand on this for a long time. But there were competing elements years ago that there was concern that building a new bridge would accelerate growth, accelerate building, accelerate the cost, bring children to Cape Cod that we would need to educate. There were always reasons not to deal with it. But it wasn't the right thing to do. And we absolutely have to start somewhere. The Corps' role is that they own the bridges. The bridges were built with WPA money in the 30s, and the Corps is responsible for the bridges because they span the canal, and the canal has national defense implications. But this happens everywhere in America where the Corps is involved in the crossing of rivers and bays. And we need to work with Federal Highway Administration, the U.S. Army Corps, Mass DOT, and the cities and towns around, and the towns in the 5th Barnstable to work towards building a new bridge. It'll be a long-term proposal. It's likely to be a 10-year window before we can actually get another bridge. In the interim, we need to make changes on the Cape side of both of our bridges. We still have the Bourne Rotary. We still have very poor conditions on Sandwich Road. I was knocking on doors in the area across from the Gallo Ice Arena, and the people there are totally disenfranchised by traffic from the Bourne Bridge all weekend long, nearly 30 weekends a year. So we can do better than we're doing both on localized projects on each side of the bridge and to initiate building a new bridge.
All right. Representative Hunt, transportation, bridges, please.
Well, I came over here to this debate tonight from a meeting that was in Hyannis at the Transportation Center where the Mass DOT is traveling around the state having a listening tour. And fortunately, they were able to let me jump in at the top of that. And one of the subjects that I brought up was certainly the bridge traffic going across the Cape Cod Canal. There's no question, in my meeting that I had with Larry Davis over the Corps of Engineers, who's in charge of watching after the canal and the bridges, he agreed that we need to have a new bridge. He actually pointed to one that crosses part of the Chesapeake Bay as a good example of what would make sense to have instead of the Sagamore Bridge. And it would be 3 lanes in both directions with a breakdown lane on each side. And we also talked about the potential of having the railroad cross at that point as well, because the railroad could never be a commuter railroad with having to go all the way down to Buzzards Bay and out to Lakeville and up to Boston. It just takes too long. So those are big projects, and one of the things that we need to do is plan for that. And on that line and crossing the aisle again, as I always have to do, I talked to Tim Madden, who is the representative for the Cape and Islands, for the islands as well as part of Falmouth. And we put a letter out to not only the state legislators, but out to the 2 senators and our congressmen to say that we need to have some long-range planning meetings that would involve the Army Corps of Engineers. It would also involve Mass DOT, because they would certainly be involved on both sides of that project of the canal, and also the RTA, so we could deal with the goals that they have in dealing with Upper Cape traffic. So that is actually scheduled, and we'll be doing that during the spring. Everybody agreed to it, actually. We don't have a date, but it'll be happening in the spring, and I think it's a great way to kick off the talk about a long-range solution for those bridges.
Well, let me ask this so we're clear for both of you. Are you in favor of 1/3 bridge, removing one of the bridges? Representative Hunt, do we want a third bridge and then keep the Bourne and the Sagamore?
No. The idea would be that the Sagamore is the real problem, and I think we agree with that. And have the Sagamore opened up for more traffic is what Larry Davis said that he thinks would solve the problem for both of those bridges, and I agree with that. So we're talking about replacing the Sagamore Bridge with a different structure. And it's also one of those things that you have to plan for that in the long term. And in between, he said that some of the things that they're going to be doing to avoid having the catastrophes that we had in the spring, you mentioned the perfect storm of all of this road work, and they're going to be replacing the decking on the Sagamore Bridge coming up in a couple of years. So they are thinking about being able to pre-form the pieces of cement that goes up on to create the decking on the bridge. And instead of pouring cement in place, which would make things go a whole lot faster. So I have to give them credit for being thinking about that proactively and making sure that we're going to be having projects that will interrupt us less going forward than certainly what we saw in the spring.
So your idea would be 3 spans, Sagamore, Bourne, and then still having the railroad bridge there.
Yes, replacing the Sagamore,
Right.
have the Bourne, and potentially a railroad bridge next to the Sagamore Bridge.
Okay, Mr. Ellis, so where are you now in terms of how many bridges do you want at the end of the day over the canal?
Well, I'm really happy that as a candidate for the 5th Barnstable District, I have been able to show leadership on this issue already. Because I was the first person to write to the Cape Cod Times and say, we need another bridge, and we need to address this issue. And I'm really happy that now it's come forward and is really important, and there's a discussion about it. But I personally think that it is totally inappropriate for anyone to be standing here in this studio this evening and be talking about how many bridges we would need. This is a long-term planning effort that is going to require input from all of these parties. It's a process that hasn't even started yet. And it would be ridiculous for anyone to stand here and talk about the number of bridges that would end up after a thoughtful planning process takes place. We will flush out whether we need to build a 3rd bridge and keep the other 2 bridges, whether there'll be a rail issue, but it's not appropriate for us to be standing here. We're not transportation planners. We're not bridge builders.
So
I would initiate the process of planning a new bridge and take input from all of the parties before we decide to do anything
Right, so you
like that.
you want to go through a planning process before you come to some type of decision?
Yeah, we would have to.
Well, I actually said that,
Okay.
that we're going to be meeting to talk about the long-range plans. What I was repeating was what Larry Davis, who is in charge of the canal for the Army Corps of Engineers and the bridges, what he thought would be good solutions for us. And he actually does have the expertise in this area. And let me tell you, if you think that writing a letter to the Cape Cod Times is leadership, you should talk to the rest of the Cape delegation that you threw under the bus with that letter. They were certainly not happy with you taking a swipe at them and saying, hey, I could do better because I was a DPW director one time.
Well, I think that leadership is taking people where they otherwise aren't going. And we weren't going there. And there was no real discussion about this. And I'm proud of that. But that's not really the issue.
Your letter didn't have anything to do with triggering these discussions. These discussions have been going on for a long time. The letter was wonderful, looks great on your website, but it's not the reason why we're doing these things.
Well, no, it isn't. The reason why we're doing it is because we haven't done anything about this in the past. And the reason why it's so important that we address this is because it's crushing our Upper Cape economy and crushing our Cape economy. And the idea of a third bridge, and there are multiple versions of this, and Larry Davis is a very capable engineer and is a Sandwich resident and has done a really good job. And what Representative Hunt was writing in the paper was that the Army Corps was giving us the big middle finger.
That's correct, and I still stand behind that.
Well,
and we had that discussion too.
Yeah, and I would never speak
Larry
that
and I have
way.
gotten over that, believe me.
Well, I would never speak that way about an organization that I had to work hand in hand with to solve a problem. And so I think what really needs to be done is a thoughtful, long-term planning process to determine what we need to do to solve the Cape's traffic problems vis-a-vis the bridge. And it may be that a third bridge is necessary so that we can have an active bridge, 2 active bridges, while we maintain the other bridge. So that's something that's been built right into the Corps' dialogue on this for years.
All right, I think we've fleshed this out. I'm going to move us on.
Sure.
This will be a more quick question we'll get through. A couple folks have asked to know your thoughts about the ballot questions. So these are, I guess, pretty much yes or no answers. And Patrick, first question to you. I'll have you answer 2 and 3. Your position on question 2, the prescribing medication to end life. Do you have a position on that at this point?
I'm in favor of that.
And then question 3, medical use of marijuana.
I'm in favor of that.
And Representative Hunt on those 2 questions. Question 2, prescribing medication to end life.
No, because there are too many ways to get around the intent of the law. And I'm really afraid that someone who may be in the line for an inheritance.
But is that a yes or no answer, Matt?
I'll give you a chance to respond to what he's saying, Patrick.
The biggest problem that I see is, as an example, say a grandson is in the line for inheritance, and all that the bill requires at this point is that somebody, 2 people witness the request. One of those can be a family member, and the other person just can't be a family member and can't be in line for an inheritance. That's a real problem. Because it could be, I'm using the example of a grandson who would be able to inherit this, so he talks his grandma into saying, yeah, it's probably a good idea, we'll save the estate. And the other witness could be his best friend. That is a wide open loophole, and on fundamental reasons, and as well as religious reasons, the sanctity of life is too important for me, and I just couldn't vote yes on question 2.
I am going to give you a response, Mr. Ellis, in just a second, but Representative Hunt, question 3, medical use of marijuana, yes, no?
It's almost the same answer. No, because for a simple reason. It's very similar to the Colorado law, and in a nutshell, 97% of the people who run around with a medical marijuana card do not exhibit any of the debilitating conditions that are listed in that citizen's petition. None of those. 97% of the people don't have any of those conditions. And the average person with a card in Colorado is 29 years old, white, male with a history of drug abuse. It's just a way, a backdoor way, to legalize marijuana. I'd be happy to have the discussion on legalizing marijuana, but I think that couching it in the terms of if you don't vote for this, that you have no compassion, is just an unfair way to deal with the question.
All right, and I will now allow you, Mr. Ellis, to expand a little bit more on your answers to those 2 questions.
Well, the consistency between the 2 answers for me is that they both involve patients and their doctors. And I'm a civil person who really emphasizes civil liberties, and I don't wish to get in between a doctor and a patient on marijuana, and I don't believe in getting in between a patient and a person who wishes to end their life. And I don't think that, in my opinion, that's any different than when my own father made the decision that he did not want to go on dialysis after having a severe medical condition and went home and had hospice care and passed away. He made that decision himself. And I think that other states have had success with this. And I think that, again, this is consistent with my opinion on civil liberties.
All right. I believe I'm taking a look at our time here, and we will have time to get to one more round of questions to allow us to have closing statements, and we will go with Representative Hunt. Those of us who cover the news here on the Cape have been inundated with stories over the past many years about recently cars being stopped with literally trunks full of prescription drugs. The police tell us it's the new crisis here on Cape Cod. It's not heroin or cocaine anymore. So I know this has become an issue. Representative Hunt, you've talked about it before, so I'd like both of you to, let's try to keep our answers to the time constraints so we can get to our closing statements. So Representative Hunt, the issue of our prescription drug problem here on Cape Cod.
I think this is at the top of the heap when it comes to issues that we need to deal with. If we continue to allow things to get worse, as they have over the last 15 years or so since OxyContin was introduced, and by the way, prescription painkillers are the #1 cause of deaths in overdoses in the Commonwealth, more so than in heroin or cocaine or anything else. It is a huge problem. We may not even need to be talking about expanding the bridges if we don't get a hold of this problem that's on Cape Cod. It has the potential to ruin us as a place of a destination, as a resort destination. I had said before that I'd worked on a bill, Senate 2125, that we got passed. I'm very proud of that. But I think that we need to take some cues from other states that have put more money into treatment and less money into allowing people just to go through the turnstile of being arrested, going through the courts, going to jail, coming out, getting arrested, etc. That is something that I think that, in fact, a precedent has been set in Texas, where in 2005 they started spending a whole lot of money on treatment instead of the incarceration of non-violent drug offenders. And over the last 6 years, what they found is they've actually saved billions of dollars in Texas, partly because they're not building 4 new prisons, and because last year they announced that they're closing a prison because the prison population is down so much. And also at a 40-year low in Texas last year, at the end of the year, they reported that crime was also down to a 40-year low. So it's something that I think we need to press very hard on, and I'm doing that with my involvement in a joint committee on that issue, as well as the Interagency Council.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Well, I couldn't agree with Representative Hunt anymore, and I commend him for his work on that committee. It's a good thing that the committee that he's on, it has great membership on the committee, and Senator Keenan and Liz Melia, Representative Liz Melia from Jamaica Plain, and I know Representative Hunt has been very active in that, and it's hard to argue with the importance of that. They've made some great strides, and I commend him for his efforts on that bill.
All right, well, gentlemen, that would bring us to the end of our round of questions. I think we've dealt with a lot of issues tonight for the 5th Barnstable, and it leaves us just enough time for each of you to have a 2-minute closing statement, and in many ways, kind of your closing argument for the voters as we head to the November election. And in our closing, Mr. Ellis will have the final word, as Mr. Hunt had the opening statement. So, Mr. Hunt, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement tonight.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate the fact that we got another opportunity to be in front of a TV as well as the radio audience here. It's really important for us to continue doing a lot of good work that got started in my first term. And I have outlined some of those things that I want to work on. There's nothing more important than dealing with prescription drug abuse on Cape Cod. And there are also many, many opportunities to work on fraud, waste, and abuse in the state system, including dealing with the EBT card issues once and for all. We still have 80% of the money coming out of those EBT cards out of ATM machines. Until we close that loophole, we absolutely cannot get control over how those are being used. 20,000 cards a month that get issued, 15,000 cards a month that are supposedly lost. The whole thing is rife with fraud, and we need to deal with that situation. I'm also dealing with an income tax simplification law, and the whole idea of that is to free up resources that we're spending on income tax auditing and get those people to do things that are more important, bigger on corporations who are avoiding income taxes by allocating their revenues outside of this state. It's something that we can do to get a lot more money in the system without actually having to hire more people if we just do these things smartly. So I'll close with this. I've been your representative for 2 years. I'm very hard-working. I've voted 100% of the time. I've been to all my committee hearings. I take this job very seriously, and I ask you for your vote for me, Randy Hunt, on Tuesday, November 6th.
Thank you, Representative. And closing statement from Mr. Ellis, please.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thank you to XTK, and thank you to the television station 99. I believe we can do better. I believe I'm prepared to do better. I believe we can refocus on the issues that are of significant importance. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to the environmental protection elements tonight, because I think that for Cape Cod, protection of water quality, protection of our watersheds is extremely important. Without clean water, no one will come to Cape Cod. We absolutely have to address this. And we need to address this in a formative way so that we can resolve these problems for future generations. We need to rise to the challenges that are in front of us. We can do better. We can grow this economy. That's why I have the endorsements of AFL-CIO, the Mass Teachers, the Professional Firefighters, the Sierra Club, the Environmental League, NARAL, Planned Parenthood, the Retirees Association, the Carmen's Union, the Carpenters Union, and many more. I want to thank my family for supporting me in this race. I want to thank my wife Jane, my mother, my brothers and sisters, all of my volunteers. I have hundreds of donors. I have tremendous support from both the Republican side and from the Democratic side. I ask for your vote on November 6th. Together with you, we can do better.
Gentlemen, thank you. Patrick Ellis and Randy Hunt, thanks so much for being part of our debate here tonight.
Very good. Good job.
And thank you to everybody at home listening on the radio and watching on television. Please vote in November. Thank you to everybody here at Cape Cod Community Media Center, Terry Duenas and his staff, and our staff at WXTK Radio back in our studios, our producer Brandon Hopkins, Doug Verney in the newsroom, and our Vice President of Operations, Kevin Matthews. Thanks so much for everybody for being with us, and go and vote in November. Thank you.